The high-stakes environment of congressional oversight chambers often serves as the ultimate litmus test for the operational integrity of American federal institutions. Within these storied halls, the friction between executive mandates and legislative accountability creates a volatile landscape where the future of national stability is frequently debated. Senator Jon Ossoff has recently emerged as a central figure in this theater of political scrutiny, directing a series of incisive inquiries toward top-tier administration officials. His line of questioning reflects a profound concern regarding the systemic erosion of institutional expertise within the federal workforce. By confronting Budget Director Russ Vought, the senator highlighted what he perceives as a strategic but damaging reconfiguration of essential government roles. The dismissal of seasoned professionals in the fields of nuclear safety and medical evaluation represents more than a mere human resources dispute. It signifies a potential vulnerability in the nation's technical defense mechanisms and public health infrastructure. These experts serve as the invisible backbone of federal oversight, ensuring that the most hazardous materials and critical health standards are managed with scientific precision. When such pillars are removed, the resulting vacuum creates a crisis of confidence that resonates far beyond the hallways of Washington. The morale of the civil service, often described as the steady hand of governance, faces an unprecedented challenge under such administrative pressures. Ossoff's interrogation sought to expose the long-term consequences of prioritizing ideological alignment over specialized competency within these sensitive sectors. The tension escalated significantly as the focus shifted from internal management to the high-stakes realm of national intelligence and military readiness. The exchange with Director Radcliffe brought to light a disturbing breach of protocol involving the unauthorized disclosure of military strike plans to the press. In the world of global strategy, the sanctity of classified information is the primary safeguard for both personnel and tactical advantages. Ossoff characterized this leak not merely as an administrative error, but as a profound failure of professional conduct that endangers active operations. Such breaches have the potential to destabilize delicate diplomatic balances and provide adversaries with a roadmap of American intentions. The discourse during this hearing underscored the fragile nature of state secrets in an era of hyper-partisan media engagement. When sensitive military blueprints become fodder for public consumption, the risk of miscalculation by foreign actors increases exponentially. The senator's insistence on accountability within the intelligence community reflects a broader demand for a return to rigorous standards of operational security. This scrutiny serves as a reminder that the machinery of national defense relies as much on discretion as it does on firepower. The implications of these failures suggest a systemic need for a re-evaluation of how sensitive data is compartmentalized and protected. Without a disciplined approach to information management, the strategic edge of the United States remains perpetually compromised on the international stage. The transition from security concerns to social welfare highlights the multifaceted nature of the current legislative struggle over the soul of American governance. At the heart of this debate lies the Affordable Care Act, a cornerstone of domestic policy that remains a flashpoint for intense political disagreement. Ossoff has utilized his platform to advocate passionately for the preservation of health insurance tax credits that millions of citizens rely upon. This advocacy is framed not just as a fiscal argument but as a fundamental commitment to the physical well-being of the electorate. For many Americans, these credits represent the thin line between receiving life-saving treatments and facing financial ruin due to medical debt. The senator's rhetoric emphasizes the human cost of legislative inertia, pointing to the real-world consequences of removing these financial safety nets. By grounding the discussion in the lived experiences of his constituents, he elevates the debate from abstract policy to a moral imperative. The preservation of these services is presented as a litmus test for the government's dedication to its most vulnerable populations. This focus on healthcare access serves as a domestic counterbalance to his rigorous oversight of the nation's security apparatus. It illustrates a vision of governance where the state is both a fierce protector of national interests and a compassionate provider of essential services. The political battle over ACA subsidies continues to be one of the most defining issues of the current era. The complexities of modern statecraft require a delicate balancing act between maintaining domestic stability and projecting strength through a principled foreign policy. Ossoff has increasingly advocated for a more assertive approach to international relations, specifically regarding the utilization of military aid as a tool of influence. This perspective suggests that American support should not be viewed as an unconditional entitlement, but as a strategic partnership rooted in shared objectives. The case of Israel serves as a primary example of this evolving philosophy within certain sectors of the American political establishment. By proposing that aid be linked to adherence to humanitarian values, the senator seeks to align tactical assistance with broader ethical standards. This approach aims to ensure that the deployment of American resources does not inadvertently facilitate actions that contradict the nation's core principles. Such a shift in policy represents a significant departure from decades of traditional diplomatic engagement in the Middle East. It reflects a growing desire among younger legislators to recalibrate long-standing alliances to better reflect contemporary strategic realities. The use of leverage in this manner is intended to foster a more accountable and transparent relationship with key global partners. It also serves to signal to the international community that American interests are inextricably linked to the promotion of stability and human rights. This recalibration is viewed by proponents as a necessary step toward a more sustainable and respected global presence. As the federal government grapples with these internal and external pressures, the role of congressional oversight becomes increasingly vital to the health of the republic. The intense questioning of officials like Vought and Radcliffe serves as a mechanism for transparency in an often opaque administrative landscape. Each hearing provides a window into the decision-making processes that shape the lives of millions of people both at home and abroad. The friction between the branches of government is a designed feature of the American system, intended to prevent the overreach of any single entity. Ossoff's performance in these settings is indicative of a broader trend toward more aggressive legislative intervention in executive affairs. This dynamic ensures that even the most powerful officials must justify their actions before the representatives of the people. The focus on technical expertise, information security, and humanitarian standards creates a comprehensive framework for evaluating government performance. These proceedings also serve to educate the public on the intricate workings of the agencies that manage their taxes and their safety. The stakes of these debates are heightened by the rapid pace of technological change and the evolving nature of global threats. In this environment, the demand for competent and ethical leadership has never been more pressing or more scrutinized. The ongoing dialogue between the Senate and the executive branch will continue to define the boundaries of federal power for years to come. The outcome of these confrontations will determine the resilience of the nation's institutions in an age of profound uncertainty and rapid transformation. The confrontation between legislative scrutiny and executive management reached a fever pitch during the testimony regarding the systematic restructuring of the federal workforce. At the heart of this ideological battlefield stood the Office of Management and Budget, where Russ Vought executed a vision that many critics viewed as a direct assault on the concept of the nonpartisan expert state. Senator Ossoff's line of inquiry delved into the specific mechanics of how these personnel decisions were orchestrated, suggesting a pattern of removing individuals whose primary loyalty was to scientific integrity rather than political expediency. The dismissal of nuclear safety experts is a particularly chilling example of this trend, as these roles require decades of specialized training and an uncompromising commitment to public safety protocols. In the delicate ecosystem of nuclear regulation, The loss of even a few key senior evaluators can lead to a catastrophic degradation of oversight capabilities. Ossoff pressed for a justification of these removals, questioning whether the short-term gains of administrative streamlining could ever outweigh the long-term risks of a nuclear mishap. The dialogue exposed a fundamental rift in how the role of the federal government is perceived in the 21st century. For the administration, it was a matter of reclaiming control over a supposedly recalcitrant bureaucracy, while for the senator, it was an abandonment of the basic duty to protect the citizenry from high-consequence technical failures. This clash serves as a microcosm of the broader struggle to define the boundaries of political influence within agencies that were designed to operate on the basis of objective data and rigorous analysis. The erosion of expertise was not confined to the energy sector, as the medical community within the federal government also faced significant upheaval. Medical evaluators, responsible for everything from drug safety to the management of public health crises, found themselves at the center of a reorganization that appeared to prioritize speed and political alignment over cautious deliberation. Ossoff argued that the departure of these medical professionals creates a dangerous vacuum at a time when the nation is increasingly reliant on federal guidance for health stability. The institutional memory lost in these transitions is irreplaceable, as it consists of the nuanced understanding of complex regulatory frameworks that cannot be easily taught to new recruits. During the hearings, the senator underscored the reality that when medical assessments are compromised, the physical health of every American is placed in jeopardy. The questioning sought to bring to light whether these staffing changes were motivated by a desire to weaken the regulatory state's ability to challenge private sector interests or executive directives. By focusing on the specific identities of the departments affected, the inquiry moved beyond theoretical debate and into the realm of concrete administrative failure. The defense offered by the budget director centered on the necessity of efficiency and the right of an elected administration to staff the government as it sees fit. However, the counterargument presented by Ossoff suggested that such a right does not extend to the dismantling of essential safety nets that the public relies upon for survival. This tension highlights a recurring theme in American political history: the struggle to balance democratic accountability with the need for a stable, professional civil service that transcends election cycles. Beyond the immediate loss of personnel, the impact on the internal culture of federal agencies has been described as a crisis of morale that threatens the future of recruitment. When highly skilled professionals see their peers dismissed for reasons that appear arbitrary or political, the incentive to pursue a career in public service is drastically diminished. Ossoff highlighted that the government must compete with the private sector for top-tier talent in fields like nuclear physics and epidemiology. If the federal work environment is perceived as volatile or hostile to independent expertise, the brightest minds will inevitably choose to take their skills elsewhere. This brain drain creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where the government becomes less effective because it can no longer attract the specialized labor required to manage a modern superpower. The senator's interrogation of Vought was designed to force a public acknowledgement of this secondary consequence of the administration's personnel policies. He pointed out that the cost of retraining new staff and the loss of efficiency during the transition period far exceed any perceived savings from budget cuts. The long-term fiscal irresponsibility of these actions was presented as a direct contradiction to the OMB's stated mission of prudent financial management. The debate thus shifted from a question of political philosophy to one of basic organizational competence. It raised the uncomfortable possibility that the infrastructure of the American state is being hollowed out from within, leaving it ill-equipped to handle the complex challenges of a globalized and technologically advanced world. The political theater of the hearing also provided a platform to discuss the broader implications of Schedule F and other administrative tools used to reclassify civil service positions. This move was seen by Ossoff and his allies as an attempt to return to a 19th century spoils system, where government jobs are handed out as rewards for political loyalty. The defense of the merit-based civil service is a cornerstone of the senator's legislative identity, reflecting a belief that the government should function like a well-oiled machine rather than a political organ. By challenging Vought on the legality and ethics of these reclassifications, the inquiry sought to establish a record of how executive power can be used to bypass congressional intent. The tension in the room was palpable as the two figures represented diametrically opposed views on the nature of state power and the obligations of public officials. Ossoff's use of specific data points regarding vacancy rates and turnover in critical departments served to anchor the discussion in reality, preventing the witnesses from retreating into vague generalities. This tactical approach is a hallmark of modern congressional oversight, where the goal is to create a documented trail of administrative decisions for future legal or legislative action. The narrative that emerged was one of a government at a crossroads, deciding whether to remain a bastion of professional excellence or to transform into an extension of the incumbent's political apparatus. The stakes of this decision are nothing less than the functional integrity of the United States government and its ability to deliver on its promises to the people. As the session drew to a close, the focus remained on the human element of these high-level policy shifts. Ossoff reminded the committee that behind every statistic of a dismissed employee or a reorganized department is a professional who has dedicated their life to a specific field of public service. The emotional weight of his remarks was intended to resonate with a public that often views the federal government as a faceless and distant entity. By humanizing the experts who are targeted, he framed the administration's actions as not just a policy failure but a betrayal of the dedicated individuals who keep the country running. This rhetorical strategy serves to bridge the gap between complex administrative law and the everyday concerns of the electorate. It also reinforces the idea that good governance is fundamentally about people, both those who serve and those who are served. The relentless questioning of Russ Vought was a demand for a higher standard of leadership, one that recognizes the value of institutional stability and professional respect. The legacy of these hearings will likely be measured by the extent to which they were able to halt or slow the trend of politicizing the civil service. For now, the conflict remains unresolved, a persistent friction point in the ongoing dialogue between the branches of government. The record established during these proceedings will serve as a vital reference point for future debates on the limits of executive authority and the protection of the federal workforce. The focus of the congressional inquiry shifted with a palpable intensity from internal administrative management to the volatile arena of national security and intelligence integrity. In this segment of the proceedings, Senator Ossoff turned his scrutiny toward Director Radcliffe, addressing a breach of protocol that many observers consider a cardinal sin within the defense establishment. The revelation that highly classified military strike plans had been disclosed to a member of the press sent shockwaves through the intelligence community, raising fundamental questions about the protection of state secrets. Ossoff's approach was not merely an exercise in political posturing, but a calculated demand for accountability regarding the stewardship of the nation's most sensitive tactical data. In the realm of global strategic competition, the secrecy of military intentions is the primary currency of deterrence and operational success. When such information is compromised, the risks extend far beyond domestic political embarrassment. They directly endanger the lives of service members and the viability of long-term strategic objectives. The Senator's interrogation sought to isolate whether this leak was a result of systemic incompetence or a deliberate attempt to influence public perception through the weaponization of classified material. By forcing a public discussion on this failure, the hearing highlighted a dangerous trend where the boundaries between objective intelligence and political narrative continue to blur. This exchange served as a stark reminder that the machinery of American defense relies on a foundation of absolute discretion and professional discipline. The gravity of leaking military blueprints cannot be overstated, as such actions provide adversaries with an unprecedented window into the strategic thinking and operational capabilities of the United States. During his questioning, Ossoff emphasized that the professionalism of the intelligence apparatus is the first line of defense against global instability. He characterized the leak as dangerously unprofessional, a term that resonates with a specific weight in a community where adherence to the need-to-know principle is mandatory. The discourse revealed a troubling disconnect between the high-level officials responsible for overseeing these secrets and the rigorous protocols intended to protect them. For the senator, the issue was not just the act of leaking itself, but the apparent lack of immediate and severe consequences for those who compromise national safety for fleeting media cycles. This failure of oversight suggests a culture of impunity that can embolden further breaches, creating a cycle of vulnerability that is difficult to break. The inquiry demanded a full accounting of the internal investigations conducted following the leak, seeking to ensure that such a lapse would never be repeated. By holding the director's feet to the fire, Ossoff was asserting the Senate's role as a vital check on an intelligence community that often operates in the shadows. This oversight is essential to maintaining the public trust, as citizens must believe that their government is capable of guarding the secrets that keep the nation secure. Furthermore, the discussion delved into the broader implications of how intelligence is utilized to justify or communicate military actions to the American public. The senator raised concerns that the selective leaking of information can be used to bypass traditional legislative debate, effectively presenting the public with a fait accompli regarding military engagement. This practice undermines the democratic process, as it removes the opportunity for a transparent evaluation of the risks and benefits of any given military strategy. Ossoff argued that the integrity of the information provided to the press and the public must be beyond reproach to prevent the manipulation of national sentiment. The tension during the hearing underscored a long-standing debate in American politics regarding the balance between the public's right to know and the state's requirement for secrecy. However, Ossoff's position was clear. While transparency is a virtue in domestic policy, the unauthorized disclosure of active military plans is an act of negligence that serves no one but the nation's rivals. The director's defense, often centered on the complexities of managing a vast intelligence bureaucracy, was met with skepticism by a senator who views the chain of command as the ultimate repository of responsibility. The clash highlighted the friction between a new generation of legislators demanding absolute accountability and an established order that has grown accustomed to a certain degree of operational opacity. As the questioning progressed, the conversation touched upon the impact of these security breaches on American alliances and international standing. Diplomatic partners often share sensitive information with the United States under the strict assumption that it will be handled with the highest level of confidentiality. When the U.S. demonstrates an inability to secure its own internal military plans, it sends a signal to the world that American intelligence channels may be compromised or unreliable. Ossoff pointed out that the erosion of trust with key allies can lead to a decrease in information sharing, which in turn diminishes the global reach of the American intelligence network. This domino effect of security failures represents a strategic retreat that the nation can ill afford in an era of rising geopolitical tensions. The senator's focus on this international dimension brought a necessary global perspective to what could have otherwise been viewed as a domestic administrative dispute. He argued that the lack of discipline at the highest levels of the administration directly undermines the work of diplomats and military attaches who rely on American credibility to achieve their objectives. The hearing thus became a forum for reasserting the importance of professionalism as a prerequisite for effective global leadership. It reinforced the idea that the internal conduct of American officials is inextricably linked to the nation's power and influence on the world stage. In closing this line of inquiry, the focus returned to the individual responsibility of those in leadership positions to foster an environment of integrity. Ossoff's final remarks in this section of the hearing were a call to return to the core values that have historically defined the American intelligence and military establishments. He urged for a refocusing on mission-driven outcomes rather than politically motivated disclosures, suggesting that the current trajectory is unsustainable and hazardous. The interrogation of Director Radcliffe served as a formal record of dissent against the casual treatment of state secrets, establishing a benchmark for future oversight. It also functioned as a warning to other officials that the Senate would no longer tolerate the conflation of national security with partisan interests. The implications of this exchange will likely resonate within the halls of the Pentagon and the various intelligence agencies for months to come. By drawing a hard line on the issue of military leaks, Ossoff has positioned himself as a guardian of the institutional standards that are supposed to transcend political administrations. The session concluded with a lingering sense of the work still required to repair the damage done to the nation's security protocols. This ongoing struggle for accountability remains a central theme in the contemporary American political narrative, highlighting the constant need for vigilance in the protection of the Republic. The shift in the hearing's atmosphere was nearly instantaneous as the discussion pivoted from the clandestine world of military secrets to the visceral, everyday realities of the American healthcare system. Senator Ossoff transitioned into a more emotive yet equally disciplined rhetorical mode, championing the preservation of the Affordable Care Act's tax credits. In the American political landscape, healthcare is not merely a policy debate. It is a battleground of values that defines the social contract between the state and its citizens. Ossoff framed these financial subsidies as a critical lifeline, the removal of which would precipitate a public health crisis for millions of families. His advocacy centered on the idea that economic security and physical health are inextricably linked, forming the foundation of a stable society. For many of his constituents, these credits are the only mechanism that makes quality insurance affordable, serving as a buffer against the astronomical costs of modern medicine. The senator argued that any attempt to roll back these provisions constitutes a direct threat to the welfare of the most vulnerable populations. By grounding his argument in the human cost of legislative decisions, he sought to move the conversation beyond the sterile confines of budgetary math. This focus on the human infrastructure of the country highlights a core tenet of his political philosophy, that the strength of the nation is measured by the health and security of its individual members. The debate over the ACA tax credits also reflects a broader ideological struggle regarding the role of government in redistributing resources to ensure basic human needs. Critics of these subsidies often point to fiscal responsibility and the perceived inefficiencies of federal mandates, yet Ossoff countered these claims with a focus on preventative care and long-term economic stability. He posited that when citizens have access to consistent medical services, the overall burden on the emergency care system is reduced, leading to a more efficient and cost-effective national health framework. The senator's defense of the ACA was underscored by a sense of urgency, as he warned that the expiration or reduction of these credits would lead to a dramatic spike in the number of uninsured Americans. This, in turn, would create a ripple effect throughout the economy, as medical debt continues to be a leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States. By highlighting the interconnectedness of healthcare and financial viability, the inquiry challenged the administration to consider the systemic repercussions of its fiscal priorities. The rhetoric used during this segment of the hearing was designed to resonate with a public that is weary of partisan gridlock and anxious about the rising costs of living. Ossoff's position was presented as a common-sense protection of established benefits that have already proven their value to the electorate. Furthermore, the senator's advocacy for healthcare access served as a bridge to discuss the widening disparities in the American medical landscape. He pointed out that the removal of tax credits would disproportionately affect rural communities and minority populations, groups that have historically faced significant barriers to obtaining quality care. This focus on equity adds a layer of moral complexity to the debate, framing healthcare as a fundamental civil right rather than a market commodity. Ossoff's line of questioning suggested that the government has a proactive responsibility to ensure that the benefits of modern medicine are distributed fairly across all demographics. By invoking the stories of individuals who have been saved by the provisions of the ACA, he brought a sense of moral clarity to an often convoluted legislative process. This strategy is a hallmark of contemporary American liberalism, which seeks to use the power of the federal government to correct systemic inequalities. The tension between this vision and the more laissez-faire approach of his opponents was on full display throughout the proceedings. The hearing became a venue for two competing visions of America's future, one that prioritizes individual market participation and another that emphasizes collective social responsibility. As the discussion deepened, Ossoff also addressed the importance of the ACA in fostering innovation and stability within the private insurance market itself. He argued that the predictability provided by federal tax credits allows insurers to offer more comprehensive plans without the constant threat of market volatility. This perspective challenges the notion that government intervention is inherently detrimental to the private sector, suggesting instead that a well-regulated framework can actually enhance market performance. The senator's mastery of these technical details allowed him to engage with administration officials on a level that moved past simple talking points. He demanded clarity on how the government planned to mitigate the fallout if these critical supports were removed, forcing a public examination of the administration's contingency plans, or lack thereof. This rigorous oversight ensures that policy shifts are not made in a vacuum, but are subjected to intense scrutiny regarding their real-world impact. The legacy of the ACA remains one of the most contentious issues in Washington, yet Ossoff's performance in the hearing signaled a renewed commitment to defending its core components against all challenges. The concluding moments of this session emphasized the senator's belief that political leaders must be held accountable for the physical well-being of the people they represent. Ossoff's emotional appeal for the preservation of healthcare services was a reminder that behind every policy memo is a person whose life may be irrevocably changed by a single vote. He framed the defense of the ACA as a fight for the soul of the nation, a struggle to determine whether the United States will be a country that leaves its citizens to fend for themselves, or one that provides a safety net in times of crisis. This narrative is a powerful tool for mobilization, appealing to the shared values of compassion and fairness that are deeply embedded in the American identity. The hearing underscored the fact that while the technicalities of tax credits may be complex, the objective is simple: ensuring that no American is forced to choose between their health and their home. By maintaining a relentless focus on this issue, Ossoff has positioned himself as a leading voice for social welfare in the Senate. The ongoing battle over healthcare will undoubtedly continue to shape the political landscape, but the arguments made during this inquiry have provided a clear and compelling roadmap for those who seek to protect and expand the current system. The final dimension of this legislative scrutiny expanded to the global stage, where the intersection of American military aid and international human rights has become a pivotal focus of contemporary statecraft. Senator Ossoff addressed the complexities of foreign assistance, advocating for a paradigm shift that moves away from unconditional support toward a more principled and leveraged engagement. This perspective is particularly relevant in the context of the United States' relationship with its closest allies, most notably Israel. The senator posited that the immense scale of American military aid provides the government with a significant moral and strategic responsibility to influence the behavior of its partners. He argued that foreign aid should not be perceived as a static obligation but as a dynamic instrument of policy that must reflect the core values of the American people. This approach seeks to ensure that American resources are utilized in a manner that promotes regional stability and adheres to the stringent standards of international humanitarian law. By introducing the concept of leverage, Ossoff is challenging the traditional diplomatic consensus that has long governed Middle Eastern relations. This shift represents a broader movement within the American political establishment to recalibrate alliances so they are more resilient and accountable to modern ethical expectations. The debate over military aid often centers on the tension between immediate tactical objectives and the long-term promotion of human rights. During his remarks, Ossoff emphasized that a truly assertive foreign policy is one that is unafraid to demand consistency from its allies. He suggested that when a partner nation receives sophisticated American weaponry, there is an implicit agreement that such equipment will be used in a way that minimizes civilian harm and respects the dignity of non-combatants. This stance is not intended to undermine the security of an ally, but to strengthen it by ensuring its actions remain defensible on the world stage. The senator pointed out that the strategic interests of the United States are ultimately served when its partners are seen as legitimate and humane actors. In the case of Israel, the argument for linked aid is framed as a necessary measure to ensure that the pursuit of security does not come at the expense of the democratic and humanitarian values that both nations claim to share. By holding allies to these standards, the U.S. reinforces its own credibility as a global leader and a defender of the rule of law. This line of reasoning challenges the administration to view foreign policy through a lens that integrates moral imperatives with military necessity. Furthermore, the discussion touched upon the role of the United States as a mediator in protracted global conflicts. Ossoff argued that for the American government to be an effective arbiter of peace, its own policies must be beyond reproach regarding the distribution of lethal aid. He highlighted that the lack of conditions on military assistance can sometimes inadvertently prolong cycles of violence or provide a shield for actions that contravene international norms. By advocating for a more conditional approach, the senator is seeking to create a feedback loop where aid is tied to measurable progress in humanitarian access and conflict de-escalation. This perspective requires a high degree of diplomatic agility, as it involves navigating the complex internal politics of allied nations while maintaining a firm commitment to American strategic goals. The inquiry underscored the idea that American influence is at its peak when it combines its material power with a clear and consistent ethical framework. The tension between this vision and the more traditional realist school of foreign policy was a central theme of the session. Ossoff's advocacy for a values-based aid policy reflects a desire to move toward a more sustainable and respected global presence, where leadership is earned through both strength and principle. The implications of this policy shift extend to how the United States manages its relationships with all international partners, not just those in the Middle East. The senator suggested that the standards applied to Israel should serve as a blueprint for a more uniform approach to foreign assistance across the globe. This would involve a comprehensive review of how American-made equipment is being used in various conflict zones and whether those actions align with the national interest of the United States. By demanding greater transparency and accountability, the legislative branch is asserting its rightful role in the oversight of the nation's global commitments. Ossoff's performance in the hearing signaled that the era of automatic aid may be coming to an end, replaced by a more scrutinizing and deliberate process. This evolution is seen by many as a necessary response to a world where non-state actors and emerging powers are constantly testing the limits of the international order. A foreign policy that is both assertive and principled is viewed as the most effective way to navigate these challenges and protect American interests in the long term. The record of these proceedings will likely serve as a foundational text for future debates on the reform of the Foreign Assistance Act and other related statutes. In conclusion, the multifaceted nature of Senator Ossoff's inquiries, ranging from domestic administrative management to the high-stakes world of global military aid, illustrates a comprehensive vision of governance. Throughout the 5 segments of this discourse, the recurring themes of expertise, accountability, and humanitarian integrity have remained constant. Whether challenging the dismissal of nuclear safety experts or demanding transparency in the use of military aid, The objective has been to ensure that the machinery of the state operates with the highest level of professional and ethical standards. These hearings represent a vital exercise in democracy, where the executive branch is held accountable by the people's representatives for the decisions that shape the future of the republic. The dialogue between the Senate and the administration serves as a reminder that power, when left unchecked, can easily deviate from the public good. Through a combination of rigorous data-driven questioning and emotive advocacy, Ossoff has highlighted the critical intersections of national security, social welfare, and international morality. The impact of these proceedings will be felt in the policies that emerge and the standards of leadership that are expected in the years to come. As the nation moves forward, the insights gained from this oversight will be essential in building a more resilient, transparent, and principled government that is truly capable of serving the needs of its people and its partners alike.